Hi everyone, my name is Nisa and I'm the Public Program Manager at the Biennale, and I'm also a SAMAG committee member. Before we start tonight's proceedings, I'd firstly like to acknowledge and pay respect to the Gadigal people of the Eora Nation, the traditional custodians of this land we're now on. And SAMAG would also like to acknowledge our funding supporters, Keeping Company, the City of Sydney, Arts New South Wales and the Australia Council for their provision of a venue. We'd also like to thank Hospital Hill, a boutique audio and video production house who record our seminars and facilitate their publishing on the website. And to kick off tonight's seminar, New Media Where To From Here, I'd like to introduce our chair, who will introduce the other speakers for us. Alessio Cavallaro is a leading artistic director, curator and producer of innovative media and sound arts. He was the executive creative producer and co-curator of ISIA 2013 Sydney, featuring Ryoji Ikeda's Test Pattern. From 2000 to 2010, he was senior curator at the Australia Centre for the Moving Image, where he was centrally involved in more than 20 major exhibitions, including the groundbreaking Transfigure. Other projects include curator Unnatural Selection, Ars Electronica, 2004, co-editor Prefiguring Cyberculture, which was published by MIT 2003, and Real Time 1996 to 2000, and founding director of Deluxe Media Arts from 1997 to 2000. So please welcome Alessio Cavallaro.
Thanks, Lisa. Notes. Hello and welcome everyone. Thanks for joining our discussion this evening here at the epicentre, the citadel of arts funding in Australia. We hope that you'll find the seminar informative, maybe a little provocative, and we invite you to chime in with questions and comments and opinions as we go along. Otherwise, you can reserve all your excited comments for a broader and greater, wider-ranging discussion after each of our speakers have had a turn. But first, on behalf of my fellow speakers, Professor Sarah Kenderdine, Dr. Daniel Moody-Cunningham, Tara Morales and Giselle Stanborough, I would like to formally thank Nisa Mackey for so generously facilitating our involvement here and also acknowledge the dedicated efforts of the SAMAG team in organising these series of events. Thanks also to the good folks, of course, of AusCo. Before inviting each of the members of the panel to speak about various aspects, or various topical aspects, we hope, of media art, I would like to loosely frame our discussion with some historical coordinates, a few reference points to help define and contextualise the development of so-called new media art, a term often misused interchangeably with video art. Perhaps more so than painting and photography, discussions of media art tend to be underscored by its technological means of production. And while we may ultimately focus more on the content of a work rather than its technocratic or technocentric modalities, these elements create a range of challenges in media art that don't concern the more traditional art forms. Video art itself emerged in the late 1960s, utilising analogue tape recording, playback and display systems. By contrast, new media art emerged a decade or so later, produced through a combination of digital information and communication technologies. And so in this sense, media art can be regarded as the art form of the 21st century, as cinema and early video are often referred to as art forms of the 20th century, and photography as the art form of the 19th century. In his 1936 essay, The Work of Art in the Age of Mechanical Reproduction, Walter Benjamin observed that, quote, much futile thought had been devoted to the question of whether photography is an art. The primary question, whether the very invention of photography had not transformed the entire nature of art, was not raised. Soon, the film theoreticians asked the same ill-considered questions with regard to film, but the difficulties which photography caused traditional aesthetics were mere child's play as compared to those raised by film, end quote. To which we could add, and in turn, the difficulties which film-caused aesthetics were mere child's play as compared to the consternation raised by media art. Indeed, the transition from analogue, mechanical and chemical processes to those that are produced digitally, the fundamental elements that constitute the photographic and filmic image, as well as the cinematic experience, namely space, time, light, sound and movement, have become infinitely elastic and endlessly reconfigurable. Essentially, new media art is defined by a number of variable characteristics that distinguish it from painting, photography, and cinema and video art. In short, media art can be unstable, generative, interactive, participatory, collaborative, performative, customisable, networked, hypertextual, and non-linear. By adopting and adapting emergent technologies, media artists have created new forms of aesthetic, sensory and cognitive experiences, often in cross-disciplinary collaborations with practitioners and researchers in other fields such as science, engineering, medicine and software development and so on. And indeed, some media artists also author their own software. So then, as a broadly generic term, media art can encompass not only screen-based work, but also robotics, bioart, sound art, data visualization, virtual and augmented realities, device art, wearable computers, projection mapping, and immersive and interactive environments. As Peter Weibel, director of ZKM Centre for Art and Media, established in Germany in 1989, has noted, quote, technological progress has expanded the operational realm of art itself, end quote. And yet, on the whole, and until relatively recently, museums and art galleries and biennales have been slow to incorporate media art into their programs. While video art eventually became commonplace in such contests over the past 25 years, it is only in the last decade or so that media art has been as widely embraced beyond the specialised events, notably Ars Electronica, established and staged in Linz, Austria since 1979, and ISEA, the International Symposium on Electronic Art, a conference and exhibition event that has roamed internationally since its first presentation in Utrecht, Netherlands in 1990. Perhaps we'll elaborate on some of these reasons for the slow uptake of media art by the mainstream art world during our discussion shortly. In the meantime, I'll briefly trace a local historical trajectory for media art. 1975 was a landmark year in Australia's cultural landscape, the year in which the Australia Council for the Arts was launched and the Australia 75 Festival of Creative Arts and Scientists was staged in Canberra. An important component of that festival was computers and electronics in arts, regarded as the first electronic arts exhibition presented in Australia. However, it wasn't until nearly 2 decades later that another event of similar scale, vision and influence was held in Australia, that being the third iteration of ISEA, staged in several major venues across Sydney in 1992, and comprised exhibitions, performances, radio broadcasts, conferences and workshops, and featured many groundbreaking Australian and international media artists, including Stellark, VNS Matrix, Ulrika Gabriel, Eduardo Kac, and Myron Kruger, a pioneer of artificial reality, as well as theorists including Manuel de Landa, Erkki Huhtamo, and Mackenzie Walk. ISEA 92 not only introduced specialist and general audiences to the new creative possibilities and future applications of the digital world, it's fair to claim that it also significantly influenced government funding policies, in particular the Australia Council and the Australian Film Commission, now Screen Australia, and curricula at tertiary institutions, as well as stirring notions of media art at venues such as the Art Gallery of New South Wales, the MCA and the Powerhouse Museum. I'm honoured to have been co-producer and co-curator of that event, along with Gary Warner, Ross Harley, Tim Grucci, among others. And 21 years later, I completed a full circle as executive producer of ISEA 2013, also in Sydney. Coincidentally, and somewhat ironically, as ISEA advanced new creative directions, 1992 marked the 7th and final presentation of the mostly analogue Australian International Video Festival, an annual event established in 1986. In Australia, 4 long-standing not-for-profit organisations have largely sustained the development and promotion of Australian and international media art and culture through a wide range of exhibitions, commissioned works and touring projects. And these are the Australian Network for Art and Technology, ANAT, which was formed in Adelaide in 1988 and auspiced both ISEA 92 and ISEA 2013. Multimedia Art Asia Pacific, MAP, established in 1998 in Brisbane. The Melbourne-based Experimenter, originally incorporated in 1986 as the Modern Image Makers Association. And Deluxe Media Arts, the longest-running screen and media arts organisation in Australia, founded in 1981 as the Sydney Super 8 Film Group, which evolved into Sydney Intermedia Network before morphing into Deluxe Media Arts in 1998. Collectively, these and similar organisations worldwide have, in many respects, nurtured the conditions for and wider acceptance of media art by developing new curatorial skills and models of exhibition, distribution and touring, collecting, archiving and publishing. Before delving into some of these matters with our panellists, let's quickly view a random selection of images of exemplary work by a few of Australia's distinguished media artists, venturesome spirits who are galvanising the worlds of art, culture and imagination in the 21st century. Okay, so from some established media artists to an emerging media artist. Our first speaker, Giselle Stanborough, very effervescent and energetic person I've ever known one. Giselle is an emerging intermedia artist whose practice often addresses online user-generated media and the way in which such technologies encourage us to identify and perform notions of the self. She graduated from COFA, the College of Fine Arts, in 2010 with the University Medal, and since then has exhibited in galleries around New South Wales and in Melbourne. Most recently, she was included as part of the Next Wave Festival for Emerging Artists, and her work has been shown online in the Washington Post's Pictures of the Day and in Hennessy Youngman's Art Thoughts. Please welcome Giselle Stanborough.
Okay. Hello, I am a media artist, but my interest in media arts sort of almost is a shadow of my training in art. I'm far more interested in the media that everybody is forced to use as a result of being consumers in in a developed country, and the sort of ethical problems that we have to navigate as consumers and ways to use these sort of everyday tools in a way that is, I think, an art ethos, that I have a kind of ethical belief about art, that it should be there to alleviate a kind of existential loneliness that I certainly sometimes have, and sort of dealing with that in a Web 2.0 environment. How can I sort of deal with this? When I graduated in 2010, my work was about YouTube, and I did that because I was interested in art, I was interested in media, and I was kind of feeling a little bit alienated from seeing work in a very slick, refined and documented form. My interest in media came from wanting to see art a lot, and also living in Sydney and sort of getting it secondhand from like Contemporary Art Daily and, you know, several blogs that sort of might give you a document of the work but not the work itself. So I became interested in media art as an audience member for media art. My most recent work that I did in Melbourne, I'll talk to you about that as an introduction to my sort of work methodology. I had broken up with my boyfriend of many years at that time, and like many other people had sort of dabbled in the old internet dating, and became aware that the modalities of that site were not, I think, conducive to this kind of connection that I see as the purpose of art, that kind of alleviation of existential loneliness, that deep idea that you're not alone in the universe, which is what you want to fall in love for. Being a regular person as well as an artist, I was like, oh, what can I do about this? And this is the thing about media, is that it is very different to the way that people see people. Computers see in number, humans see in gesture. So you're all not allowed to sign for your credit cards anymore, you all have to use pins. These sorts of things that just come at you in the world, this is sort of the essence of my practice. So even though it's like, yes, I'm an artist, more so than that, I am something that is called by economists a prosumer, which is part of Web 2.0, where you are obliged to create content as part of your status as a consumer. Things like making Facebook profiles, you know, if you want to online date, you actually have to create online content as well as consume. So that was sort of like where I began. And looking at the sort of online dating script that has quite a capitalist bias, that, you know, what are the 6 things you couldn't live without? And then you answer those 6 things. And then that makes it very easy for computers to read those things and align you with other people. Of course, when you meet someone in physical co-proximate reality, you know, it's not the same sort of, I need a tag word that I can search through thousands of tag words for. That's not the structure that humans use to relate to each other, but it is when you're in an online environment. I also work at a museum with Alex, and I really found it to be, I really enjoyed it. I really enjoyed the opportunities that I felt that art could provide to deviate from conventional scripts created by social expectations. So I thought, for Next Wave, why don't I do a work where I will create images and text specifically to invite people to the other artworks at the Next Wave Festival. And then hopefully not only expand the audience for contemporary art, because it is, you know, the same people that you see, especially in emerging circles. It's whenever you talk about contemporary art, in a way, you're always sort of preaching to the choir. Nobody in this room, I'm sure, thinks that contemporary art is a total waste of time and, you know, I don't care about it, la, la, la. And it was those sorts of people that I was interested in meeting. So I photoshopped these many profile pictures and put them up on OkCupid and Blender and Grindr and Tinder and several other platforms, and sort of tried to use my status as a prosumer in a way that the media was not designed for, in a hope to achieve a kind of broader humanist goal. In the end, I went down to Next Wave and did that, and sort of, you know, spoke to people about work. And it was a really, for me, it was a very wonderful experience, and something that I had to be mindful of as somebody that is an artist that uses these platforms for the goals of what I see as being my goal as a contemporary artist. It meant that in all other areas of media, I had to be particularly mindful of how to represent that work. That we are all prosumers, and, you know, the way that we use our Instagrams or whatever is that is actually a material. So we'll need to be especially mindful of that and relate that to the project. That's something that I feel particularly strongly about. So I didn't do really any marketing for that one because it was not for a converted art audience. The project that I'm working on at the moment is almost the complete opposite. And that involves what I sort of mentioned before, that in Sydney, a great deal of art that we see is in its pixelated, documented form that, you know, we see just there. You know, we're not experiencing immersive new media environments. We're seeing a still of an immersive new media environment. And we live in a time where I don't really think that people have a great ontological faith in the photograph. Like, nobody looks at a photograph of Kim Kardashian and thinks that she really looks like that. But at the same time, the photograph is so embedded in the way that artists must represent their practice. Give me a photograph, la, 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 everybody has a photograph. So what we've done is create a show that is almost entirely documentation, and the images of that are photoshopped in such a way that they are overly aestheticized to the extent that they have the most tenuous links to the work in the gallery itself. And it's interesting already seeing the way that people have a different literacy for embodied vision compared to images on the screen and the sort of aesthetic biases of that. It's an experimental sort of thing. The outcome, it could go very badly or it could go very well, but because of the nature of this work and using the documented photograph as a material, then, you know, I've been promoting it much more sort of vociferously, because then these platforms, once you use one user-generated platform as a media, you have to apply the same rationale to them all. So that's my practice, and I speak to you about that, I guess, because it's not unique. It's not a unique status to artists that, you know, everybody is in the same prosumption boat, and I think it works to the benefit of everyone if there is a literacy about their status, about that, so that, you know, you are not unnecessarily duped. End talk.
As I mentioned earlier, we can take one or two brief questions as we go along. So does anybody have anything they'd like to ask Giselle right now?
Did you date anyone?
Yes, I did. I dated 42 people in 3 weeks. I did. Yeah, and the oldest one was 68 and the youngest one was 21. I should mention as well that even though I'm like, I'm a prosumer, I don't know anything, la la la, I did also build my own purpose-built website for that, for this project, for people that had heard about it but didn't want to engage in pre-existing dating websites because they are capitalist. And, you know, if you sort of felt like, or maybe you had already had a partner, or you didn't want to support a kind of you know, a lot of people feel that it is a kind of exploitation of lonely people, and certainly I think that everybody would have heard a nightmare story about, you know, something in the media. There's always, you know, an anxiety about online dating, the unnaturalness of it. So I built my own one where people could remain anonymous. I believe very strongly in anonymous corners of the internet. It's the consistent online identity of, like, your Facebook, links to your Gmail, links to your this, links to your Instagram, is again something that functions to further our status as consumers. Yes.
What about the Times Literary Supplement dating section? How would you sort of position that, where it's sort of a dating marketplace, but in the context of essentially a cultural institution? How would that, I mean, I don't know if it's online or not, but how would that feel from your point of view?
I mean, I think, well, all dating sites are cultural institutions in that they are... Maybe, could you rephrase the question?
Let's say, I don't know, the Times Literary Supplement launched a dating website, so essentially it's a cultural channel. And, or even a museum looks around at museum people here. Let's say they launch a dating website. What would that be like? Essentially, it's just a marketplace. Communities are shifting quickly. People are becoming, I guess, savvier about how they look for happiness, existential alleviation, whatever it might be. Why wouldn't an institution, a contemporary cultural institution, start to behave as a dating marketplace?
Well, I mean, I think that the contemporary arts institutions are not immune to the sort of dictates of capital and the market. So, I mean, I wouldn't have anything against that. I'm more, and can have a sort of like freedom with this, that I don't have, as a user, I don't have the bottom line of that. I wouldn't have a problem with that. I care about how it manifests for the user. Say something like Tinder, or any sort of, like, it's interesting to me, this kind of embodied aesthetic that we are faced with. I was talking to you earlier, just in passing, about how early sort of cyberspatial stuff was like, oh, we're all going to escape from the body and we're going to live in the matrix and la la la. But what has actually happened is the opposite of that, because of omnipresent smartphones and cameras, is that, you know, we are so embodied, we can be documented in our embodied form at any moment. And now we sort of see all these bubbling subcultures, like I'm absolutely obsessed with online bodybuilding forums. I love them because, for that reason, that it sort of like walks that line between the disembodied sort of like passive, you know, you spend hours there, but it's totally fetishizing the body. And I think a lot of this sort of popularization of bro culture and bodybuilding is, you know, the need to Photoshop yourself in real life, because you do not control that. I mean, you could take a photo of me right now, I can't Photoshop it.
So Giselle,
I could try.
You talked about anonymity, but how in the, you know, the various regulations that are coming into play now, how do you see the, you know, the abolition, if you like, of anonymity? How it might affect your approach to what you do?
I mean, sometimes I think it's because a lot of the work that I do as well, sort of, say for example, the work in Next Wave had funding attached to it. So, you know, I did sort of have to be accountable in that sort of sense. I don't necessarily think that I could have done anonymous sort of things there. I think it's an ongoing issue. I guess as well because a internet forum, I can't believe I'm saying this, that has had a huge influence on me is 4chan, and multiple chans, Wizard Chan, that, you know, I know, you know, she knows. And the sort of the aesthetics, they're looking at, you know, things like memetics, which actually, you know, comes from genetics. It was a term originally in The Selfish Gene by Richard Dawkins. And I see a lot of young sort of net artists, you know, it's very hip, very savvy, you know, all this post-Web 2.0. I feel that there is not enough kudos given to creative communities that's really built a lexicon, really built a visual grammar for this movement, for post-internet artists. And sometimes if I do work anonymously or make works, I'm thinking particularly of a work that I did which was anonymous and about a girl called Jessie Slaughter that was bullied. It doesn't really matter, but in that sense there is a homage paid to that it's not like I'm a Web 2 artist and I'm dealing with the internet and, look at me, I made all this sort of stuff. I guess that's, it's a trite argument, it's as old as the hills. But at the same time, I think that working anonymously or paying mind to communities that work anonymously and the creative potential of that. Like if you said you were the first person that rickrolled anyone, it's like, yeah, right, man. It sort of breaks down this, the monolith of the artist. And I like that. I'm probably more net than I am art.
Well, that's a good, the notion of the net and what it actually is and how it's being used and how it's being further developed is a whole other space of being that I think is quite fascinating to keep an eye on. And I would imagine that a number of the terms and the references you've made now in relation to some of these spaces, a very kind of specialist, sort of, as you say, kind of subcult almost of...
yeah. I mean, it's interesting because the net's a massive place, obviously, that, it's hard to speak about it generally. And it is, I think, of a particular age demographic. But having said that, internationally it's huge. It's one of the top 10 forums on the internet. So, but because it is anonymous, it has rules, and amongst the rules is don't talk about 4chan. But of course, I mean, there was a while sort of which coincides with the post-internet phenomenon, the sort of popularisation of these underground things. A TV channel, Adult Swim, put on a meme from 4chan that it's a Roland Barthes thing that all subcultures will be appropriated into the capitalist system soon enough. And, we see that now with the sort of post-internet art, making it gentrified. You got to, and this is the thing with how I work, it's like, give me something I can buy, man. Which a lot of post-internet artists do.
We'll come back to that maybe in a broader Q&A a bit later, but I think now we'll move on to Daniel, Dr. Daniel Moody Cunningham. Daniel's a senior curator at Artbank and editor of Sturgeon magazine, which is also published by Artbank. And since the mid-90s, he has established an extensive track record as an artist, curator, academic and arts writer. In 2004, he completed a doctorate in cultural studies at the University of Western Sydney, where Daniel taught across art history, design and theory in cultural studies between 1997 to 2007. Please welcome Daniel Cunningham.
I think I'm showing some slides. So can I go over here? Okay. I can't really top Giselle's presentation. I won't try to muster up the same level of
You could tell a breakup story.
Yeah, a breakup story. I've got several of those. Thanks for having me, everyone. And it's great to be here. I am a media artist, and as my bio suggested, I've worked across the sector wearing different hats. But today I thought it would be best if I talked about Artbank, which is I guess my main hat in terms of full-time employment, but also because we collect media art, and I just thought that would be quite an interesting thing to talk about. Giselle's last line was about wanting something you can buy, so I guess I can talk about how Artbank has bought 56 media works to date. So just a little bit of background about Artbank. How many of you here actually know a bit about Artbank, so that I'm not assuming too much? Okay, well, I can talk in very broad terms then. For those of you who don't know anything, Artbank was founded in 1980. Fraser government initiated it, and it was conceived as an artist support program that would buy art from the primary market as a way of supporting contemporary living Australian artists, and then by leasing that work back out to private and public sector clients, we'd be able to generate enough income to continue to support the sector by buying more work. So over time, it's become a self-supporting system. We have 10,000 works in the collection, and those works range from painting, sculpture, ceramics, works on paper, photography, glass, and in 2007, we started collecting video or new media work, or as it's classified in the database, time-based work. Most of the work that has been collected is fairly standard single-channel video work, and I guess there's a practical reason for that, in that the ultimate aim of the collection is that it has the potential to lease to clients. And certainly, as you can see here, there are a couple of screens. You know, it's certainly a lot easier to display single-channel works in our clients' premises. However, we do have some sculptural installation works. The very first work acquired, time-based work that was acquired by ArtBank, was this Sam Smith work, which is a sculptural installation called Videolens. And it was the winner of the Helen Lompriere Travelling Art Scholarship in 2007. And so I guess this work set the kind of scene for ArtBank in terms of its commitment in 2007 to initiating a time-based collection. The time-based collection was launched, and so it was actually a little bit of hoo-ha built around it, and this was predating my employment at ArtBank. My predecessor, Jackie Dunn, was the senior curator at the time, and certainly demonstrated a commitment to new media and time-based work through the launching of a video collection. And so there was an event at the time that then Minister Peter Garrett launched the collection at the old premises in Rosebery. I was working at another institution called Hazelhurst and was probably one of the only curators in town not invited. But that's okay, I got the job a few years later. But I remember when it happened, and I remember thinking, oh, that's interesting. What does ArtBank do anyway? So it's kind of nice a few years later, I kind of, at ArtBank, being able to continue to build on a previous legacy. But I will say, in terms of that idea of the collection, that putting it into perspective, there are, and I counted today by just running a quick search in the database, there are 56 works in the collection, and that collection started in 2007. Most of those works are from 2007 onwards, except for one, which was, I think, the third video collected, which was the Hayden Fowler video, which was from 2006. So certainly it's a snapshot of this time. It's not collecting Super 8 films, or we're not collecting other forms of media from the 80s. Tara's going to talk about the history of Deluxe and where that came from, and certainly that archive is very rich and very reflective of a much broader history than what ArtBank is. Now, the stills I'm showing you are actually, I thought that probably the most interesting way, and this gets back to what Giselle was saying about the photograph, using the photograph to talk about the moving image, kind of a bit silly, but it was the most practical in this context, and I just thought these installation shots from an exhibition I curated out of the collection in 2011 might just give a bit of a snapshot of some of the works from the collection. Daniel Crooks on the right, that's Sam Smith on the left. Robin Hungerford, a more recent and emerging artist closer to me. The work on the right is Taryn Gill and Pillamata DuPont's Gymnasium, which won the Basil Sellers Prize that year, in 2010. They're emerging Perth artists. This is the Goat Odyssey work by Hayden Fowler, which is from 2006, which I mentioned before. Joan Ross's animation in the foreground. The sculptural element, you'll see a better photograph of that shortly. It's a work by Ms. and Mr. with the James Newitt work right at the back, and I've got a better shot of that for you shortly too. So that's the James Newitt work. Now that's the only two-channel work in the collection, and as such, I guess it has certain practical issues around its display. It was great to be able to exhibit it in this context as a two-channel projection. It would make it very difficult, I guess, for a client to consider loaning it, or leasing it, I should say. However, a number of our works have loaned to other galleries. So curators might contact us and say, look, you have this particular work in your collection. For instance, one work which I'll talk about shortly by the Kingpins called Spider Nanny, which we actually commissioned, has just loaned to SAMAG, Canberra Museum and Gallery, for a curated show about the body. Previously, another work that's loaned is a Soda Jerk work that I commissioned, which I'll talk about shortly, which loaned to Mona for their Mona Foma Festival a couple of years ago. So this is the second of two sculptural video installation works, and this is Ms. and Mr.'s work. The second work acquired of time-based category in the collection. So there are a number of other time-based works in the collection. That particular exhibition really just selected 10 out of the collection at that time, and I think in 2011 there probably would have been about 40 or so works that I was selecting from, and perhaps about half of them were works that I had acquired in my time. So I guess the collection just has continued to grow because of we continue to be committed to building it. I kind of think that if you're going to demonstrate a commitment to collecting new media work, you need to sustain it. I think that very much it's an ideological thing that we're collecting video in the first place. We know that it's not always something that our clients will want, but that's beside the point. We're an artist support program, so we're collecting work that demonstrates the cross-section of contemporary practice in Australia. So this work was the very first commissioned work. So we had started commissioning work for the collection and starting to think more strategically about where there were gaps or where there were particular client outcomes that could be tied to the commissioning of a work. And we were like, well, why don't we be quite audacious and commission a video? And so Soda Jerk were a collaborative, they're still practicing Australian collaborative group. That we were really interested in, and so we got them in for a meeting and we got this in train. This is a composite of stills from the outcome. They are remix video artists, so they remix existing popular culture and transform it into new narratives and new meanings. They used that very famous Bob Dylan music video for Subterranean Homesick Blues, where he's holding up the cards and, you know, it's all very countercultural, and Allen Ginsberg's in the background. So, like all great artists influenced by the internet, Soda Jerk reference cat memes and all sorts of internet memes by erasing the original placards and replacing them with very popular internet memes such as lolcats, Rickroll, Charlie Bit Me, Corey Worthington. Things like that, which you probably remember. My favourite one, which I don't have a screen grab of, is Leave Britney Alone.
Yes!
But the Rickroll one's quite significant because what they did, this work it works on a loop. So once it reaches the natural kind of progression of the Bob Dylan video, it just loops on and continues on for about half an hour. But halfway through that half an hour, the video itself gets Rickrolled. So the Rick Astley, and some of you are probably thinking, what the fuck's Rickroll? Because I did it certainly at the time. I was a little like, well, I missed that. But it was 2011, so I can be sure. But Rickroll is like, you know, when the Rick Astley thing kind of rolls something. Like, so if someone right now hijacked my presentation by putting Rick Astley's music video for Never Gonna Give You Up, I would have been Rickrolled. So Soda Jerk Rickrolled their own video, and also, I guess, created another added copyright layer of a problem for us, but we just thought, well, what does it matter? And certainly if you know anything about my work, I break every rule in the book when it comes to copyright, so I'm very sympathetic. So we continued to think it was a really good idea to commission video. And so what we decided would be a really good way of commissioning video is to acknowledge that people watch videos online. Our collection of videos aren't available to be viewed online, but we thought, well, look, let's just identify a particular program of commissioning and think about how those particular works could be rolled out throughout the 12-month or year-and-a-half calendar and build a kind of campaign around it and some momentum around it, and let people watch them and share them. And so they become part of the collection like everything else, and they're available to clients, and they serve exactly the same purpose. Those artists still put out bank on their CV as a collection. However, what makes these works different from everything else in the collection is that they can be watched in their entirety online and shared on social media. So we started this program, which I titled Perform Mutations, with a work by the Kingpins. And so the idea of this Perform Mutations was to consider the idea of performance in video art, and the idea that, you know, given the nature of our collection, we hadn't really been able to collect performance. I mean, a lot of institutions struggle with the idea of collecting performance, and we knew that probably the only way we really could do it was to create a particular kind of program around how performance influences video and vice versa. So the Kingpins were our first commission and a very fabulous way to launch it. You must watch this video. It goes for a minute or so, and it basically just shows this kind of weird hybrid human spider pig-like character, which inflates and explodes with confetti. And at the time we'd rebranded, we just dusted off a very, very tired brand and had much sexier branding replace it. And so it felt like a rebirth, and certainly the Kingpins work spoke to that rebirth. And so there were 6, and at the beginning we announced 6 video commissions in this series. The Kingpins launched last year in January. 2 months later we launched emerging Brisbane artist Liam O'Brien's work, and since then this work has kind of, you know, been off the chart for him. It's meant that he's been picked up by Solomon and Strumpf, and this work was in Safari. It was in the John Freeze Memorial Prize, so he kind of, there was a little bit of traction and groundswell around this virtually unknown artist who just graduated from art school in Brisbane. And then probably the most difficult work in the series, which I think is probably also one of the strongest. Mark Shorter's practice is by its nature difficult, in the sense that it would be difficult to collect, but it's also challenging as well, and he's got a whole interesting range of personas, some which are very burlesque and entertaining, and some which are a lot more kind of, I guess, like this dude, which is referencing, he's referencing war imagery and war artifacts from the War Memorial. And so Mark Shorter, followed 2 months later by a work by Melbourne artist Loreza Kozlov, followed 2 months later by art star Heath Franco. And again, Heath has been kind of widely exhibited in the last couple of years, and this particular work as well has been shown in various other exhibition contexts. Justine Williams, perhaps the most established artist in the group. Justine was in the collection with some photographic work from the 90s, so it was really nice to kind of round out her holdings in the collection with the commission of a video. And, you know, take a pill and watch this video, it'll like bust your brain. Don't tweet that. And then, Justine was actually the final one in the 6th, because at the beginning we announced it. Obviously the press release was there are 6 artists in this program called Perform Mutations, but I always imagined that, like, you know, 6 months later we'd go, oh wait, we lied, there's a bonus track. You know how like on the end of a CD there's silence for 10 minutes and then there's a song? I wanted to do that with a work by Justin Scholder and Benji Ra. And what was kind of great about this was at the very beginning with the Kingpins we were relaunching a brand, and so there was a sense of a celebration around that, and that work really spoke to it. By the time we got around to launching this, which was only about 6 weeks ago, we had moved into a new premises at Waterloo, and there were a lot of opening events around that. There was a bit of a party atmosphere, and Justin and Benji's work was kind of launched alongside all of those activities and was perfect for that. and has been like, it's gone totally viral. It's probably been watched more than any of the others. Another commissioning series we've been doing, when the current director, Tony Stevens, turned up at Art Bank, he was a bit like, that Christmas card thing you do every year where you just print an image from the collection on a Christmas card and go, happy birthday from all the staff at Art Bank. It's so boring, let's do something a bit more interesting. So, and I was totally on board because he said, let's commission an animation, send it out as our EDM, which you get in your inbox if you subscribe to our e-newsletter. And then again, like the permutations commissions, it could be watched in its entirety. And the brief for the artist was make a non-Christmassy Christmas card in the moving image. So there's nothing Christmassy about this. It's a very beautiful stop motion animation by Greedy Hen, a Sydney-based collaboration. And then 12 months later, we followed it up with another animation by Rebecca Agnew, an emerging Melbourne artist. And again, this is kind of in how I see this particular series that we're doing annually as a way of building a collection of animation within the time-based collection. And so we have one in train which will be launching at the end of November, and if you subscribe to the e-newsletter, you'll receive that. And I can't say who it is, but it'll be great. So there are a whole bunch of other videos in the collection, just some of the names you can scan through there, including, I noticed Todd Fuller's in the audience, his name's in there. You might know some of those other artists. You'll notice a spread of artists who are quite established alongside some emerging names as well, and artists from across the nation, because Art Bank is a truly national collection. Thank you.
Daniel, what's the budget for these commissions?
The budget? That's confidential.
Oh, is it so?
No. We have a particular price point with acquiring works, and we rarely would purchase work over a particular discretionary limit, because then we have to take it to a kind of advisory board level. And certainly with all of the commissions that have been new media based, they haven't exceeded $10,000. So some of the more established artists would be up around that range, and a majority of them would have been mid-range.
Deborah.
I'm Lab. I noticed you have Wade's name up there.
That's right.
I just wondered, do you guys have the capacity to collect interactive and generative systems, or are you just focusing on the moving image right now?
We're focusing on the moving image in terms of single channel. Single channel works are primarily the most, I guess, practical way of being able to support.
Based on what you can load out.
Yes. And interesting you mentioned Wade's, because that was the first video I bought. But this work isn't. And this work is not an interactive work, and work that I thought I'd have to quite fight to get it over the line, and because it's not client friendly. But it's funny, it's the most popular video we've got in the collection. It's always out.
Another perky question from me up the back. How long do you think it is before an organisation like Art Bank might collect code?
Well, we have a website. No, well, actually, that's kind of an in-joke because we didn't for a very long time, but we do now. I can't answer that question, but I don't foresee it being something. It would require a lot of thought as to how we do it. But yeah, it's hurting my brain thinking about it, actually.
Is it something that you guys are interested in, or that's just too difficult to set up?
Well, look, I'm a media artist, and obviously I'm interested in a lot of things that I wouldn't be able to acquire. I mean, we can't acquire installations, sound
I'm just interested
work.
because the Powerhouse does the same thing.
Yeah.
No.
Why?
Yeah, well, I mean, that's the thing. I mean, look, when I started at Art Bank, and there was a previous director and a previous kind of, I guess, group of curators as well, that there were certain things that we've done in the last 12 months or 12 months to 2 years that would never have happened when I started at Art Bank 4 years ago. So some of that online stuff is already a progression into another territory. So it's possible, I think, with anything that we could continue to support other forms of practice that haven't yet been set precedent, but certainly some more difficult areas of collecting would require a bit of thought as to how to be managed.
Just another quick one from me before we move on, but I think you said 56 time-based works?
Well, 57 with
57.
The one that's coming.
There are 10,000, more than 10,000 in the collection itself. So to what extent do you, as Art Bank, try to interest or engage prospective clients to look at and consider exhibiting time-based work in their various spaces?
Well, it's interesting because the videos are probably the one area of the collection where there could be a lot more rhetoric around it for our clients, but certainly the online aspect of it has helped get that out. I mean, because a big part of our EDM that goes out are our clients, so they see that we're collecting video, they see what is possible, and I know that in the past there have been certain kind of campaigns around, like in-house campaigns around educating our clients about how they can, display videos in their spaces. And we certainly have a number of clients who regularly, right from the very conservative, like, Arts New South Wales have a couple of videos in their foyer, and they have been a constant supporter of that. Every year they swap them over. And so I'm always really pleased that they continue to do that. But there's one business in the CBD, futures trading company, Optiva, one of our biggest clients, they've leased the Sam Smith installation, for example. So, some of our clients are a little bit more interested in taking risks. But of course, traditionally, some of our clients really just aren't even engaged. They just want pictures on the wall. So we have to accept that we have clients who are going to be like that, as well as clients who also want to be engaged and want to tap into other forms of media.
Okay, thank you. And having mentioned Wade Maranowski, some of you may know, and perhaps you've already been to Melbourne. If you haven't been and you're going before the end of October, Wade has a wonderful show at the National Gallery of Victoria, so do try and catch that if you're going to be in town.
And I'll just say that actually we have 2 works of his in the collection, the video and also a sculptural work which is on loan to that exhibition, one of the wooden remote controls, which is a fantastic piece.
Great. Moving on to our next speaker, Tara Morelos. Tara, a Master of Visual Arts from Sydney College of the Arts, majoring in sculpture, performance and time-based media, so a little bit of old and new media. Tara has more than 10 years' experience as an independent curator and events manager, including producer of large-scale outdoor sculpture exhibition in Hunter Valley. She joined Deluxe Media Arts in 2009 and as program manager, coordinating the touring and installation of new media and video art exhibitions in galleries throughout Australia, both regional and in the city, as well as some international projects too. As current director of Deluxe, she is responsible both for the strategic direction and artistic development of the organisation, including the management of the Deluxe Archive, which contains the work of over 1,000 artists, spanning 3 decades of experimental film, video and media arts production in Australia. Please welcome Tara Morelos.
I'm notoriously unplanned. So, and as Alessio said, we have a long and incredible history to Deluxe Media Arts, which I inherited when I got involved in the organisation. So one of the components of what we do is touring media art exhibitions. So, I have some experience in curating media art, and in particular delivering these media art shows to regional audiences. I mean, the regional touring program was well underway when I joined Deluxe, and it's proved to be a very satisfying area of what we do because regional audiences are very receptive and very appreciative of us going there. I'm going to be talking about the archive really, but just a few things came up while I was listening to that, and I suppose in that regional touring program, Deluxe fell very naturally into a position of education in a way, in educating regional galleries and curators and workers in galleries on best practice and how to deal with these very strange things. And I suppose the shows that we did curate during that period, or we do continue to curate, have a very much a focus on easy to operate, easy to use, because we did get a lot of feedback from regional galleries to say that they had very, what I would call deep space media arts exhibitions, which frankly, you know, fell over or didn't work, or they couldn't restart, or they couldn't. And so, you know, there's been that kind of ethos of that sort of easy to access media arts, which led into the educational component of where we are at now. So back to the archive, we have over 30 years. I keep saying over 30 years, but it's probably more than that now, 33, and who's counting. So we have an archive of media arts practice that spans that huge amount of time. And very differently to Daniel and the Art Bank and a number of other collections, our archive or our collection is not intentional. We don't go about collecting works. Works come to us. And so, in a way, we've yet, and I'm going to speak very, you know, personally and share my kind of, I suppose, discomfort in how to deal with this, because I believe it's an issue that we all have in various ways in our organisations. But, you know, I have Super 8 film, I have 16mm, I have a variety of analogue mediums that are in boxes in my shed, frankly. And, you know, and a bunch of other kind of variety of different device-based stuff. We've got sound art, we've got games, we've got, you know, all this sort of variety of stuff that is in our archive. So for us, or for me really, I'm grappling with these two kind of issues of preservation and access, really. And my tendency and my desire, following on from the educational bent that I've adopted, is to create access for researchers, artists, curators, the general public, school students, everyone, to this wonderful resource that we have. We're moving into working in high schools. You mentioned TAFE, and I believe that the high school area is very neglected in terms of media arts history. You know, have a lot of young people who think that, you know, what they're doing is it. You know, I'm very passionate about, you know, letting young people know that there is a rich and varied history that comes before them, and, you know, and doing that in a way that they are engaged by. So it leads on to, I suppose, our exhibition that we've put together, which will start touring in February, and it draws as its educational resource Scanlines, the archive. Online archive. Scanlines, the archive, is a project that we're a partner in. I don't know if a few of you will be familiar with Scanlines, but so it's our entire archive has been ingested, and I've just learnt it's been also harvested. So it's been ingested and it's been harvested. All I know is it's now more accessible. And the state that archive went, so it's the MCA, it's UNSW Art and Design. Well done. I've been practicing. And it's deluxe. So, and as the project increases, we'll draw on other archives. So Scanlines, the exhibition, draws on this online resource as an educational resource for the exhibition and for a series of education modules which we will take into high schools. So please stop me if I'm all over the place and you don't understand, because I feel like I'm jumping around all over the place because I have a lot of, you know, balls in the air constantly. But so the database, when it went into Scanline, was literally a database. Because of permissions, because of lack of resources, because of changes in approach over the years, over our history. But was it David? I mean, the actual database itself is a great database. it's a very comprehensive database of programming of Deluxe since it began. So, but it's not a online archive. It's not a rich archive. There's stills, no moving image, not even sound. So this is what I want to do, is I want to flesh it out and make it this sort of vibrant place that you can go and you can be amazed. But every time I go in there, I'm amazed at the wealth of history that we have in Australia. And I mean, it's an Australian resource, and I think it's very important as media artists in Australia to kind of really start developing a sense of community. And this is a really great project for that. And as one of the programmers said, she wants to create like a fire that we can all dance around and create some real heat, to Zena said that. So typically.
It's nice.
So Scanlines, the exhibition, is really a cunning ploy for me to try and get money to actually build up the online resource. So we've chosen 12 artists, and I've had a lot of hate mail actually about who we chose, so stand in line. But so we've chosen 12 artists, and Todd, who is here also, is the curator, so if you've got any hate mail, it goes to him. But I did give him the brief very substantially of choosing artists whose work could be linked very intimately to a hands-on workshop. So that's my grand plan, is that young people love making shit. Actually, we all love making shit. So teach them some exciting skills, which then mimic the skills or the techniques that we use, say, Super 8 montage or stop frame animation. And so you do that digitally, and then you trace your line back to the sort of history of it, and you throw in your your artists, and you're getting my drift? Just nod, yeah? Yeah. So that's kind of where we're going. So we will know that by the time the show launches, we will have at least 12 very solid, filled out entries in the Scanlines online archive. So we're doing artist interviews. We work with George Kut and a young graduate from UTS to make a very interactive interface for the exhibition. We will be delivering educational content as part of the exhibition, so we've been very challenged to do that in a way that doesn't look like, the Science Museum or that kind of thing, that maintains the integrity of the art, privileges the art. Yeah.
Where's it going to be shown?
Do you know what? We've got a lot of bookings. The actual response for it has been incredible. We've got 11 or 12 bookings, so from Cairns all the way down to Boney. And we've had to extend the show into 2017. So very gratified by that there's this interest. And yeah, I just think that it really shows that there's a great deal of interest in this approach. And I don't know, what else? Ask me some questions.
Well, the will is certainly there, but the resources tend to be, where things begin to kind of,
very
fall
much
apart.
So.
But I think a number of the things that you've raised there, Tara, also kind of cross over with Sarah's, work, and maybe we can, bundle a couple of questions regarding collecting and preservation and the resources to do so properly. After Sarah's presentation as well. But are there any questions immediately now for Tara? No? Okay. Do you have anything else? Oh, there's one.
I've just been surfing online, and you have... Thanks very much. Hey, I'm Jonathan. Very nice to meet you. So I just was surfing online, and it looks like you have something at Arterial tomorrow night. Do you want to tell us more about that?
Actually. Thanks for mentioning that.
Yeah. It's like what can we do? Like, how can we see more about what you do? And that's kind of a big deal. So
Well, the Arterial thing again is working with students. It's a student show, so it's a way of creating community for Deluxe. So we invited participation for graduates, recent graduates and students to submit single channel, mostly, work, and in partnership with the Commercial Gallery. So in a way, mentoring younger artists into a potential stream of activity, which is working within the commercial sector. With our education program, we're also providing another pathway for artists, you know, inviting them to put together workshops and basically creating employment for them, I suppose. So looking at the different options of how you can survive in the art world as an artist and particularly as a media artist, because it's not easy. So Arterial have partnered with us, and we will do that as a regular, I think we're doing them 4 times a year. And the idea of that is to really build it into more of a salon style where eventually, as the weather changes, we can sit around and basically, you know, discuss what is video art for a start? You know, where does that fit in a contemporary world? What is video art? You know, is it Beyonce? You know, is it, you know, what is... So yeah, that's kind of the thrust. Come along, it's fun.
Tara, you talked about the education component of your deluxe becoming very popular. Could you give me some information about what is it that the high schools, what kind of new media and what kind of content are they finding interesting to engage with?
Well, high schools, from my understanding, or the way I understand it so far, the media art that's taught in, or how it's addressed in high schools is very industry focused. So become a filmmaker, you know, become a director, become a cameraman or camerawoman or person. So I guess it's about positioning it very sort of deliberately within the visual arts, and it seems to be a strange place for it to be. And again, picking up on Giselle's point there, we're very much about using stuff that's in your local, like you're using your mobile devices or things that are easily accessible. We're doing some programs in Warren, out in Warren. We're doing some programs with Warren in Warren, which using augmented reality. So basically we'll spend a week with the high school students and create an augmented reality work around an environmental issue, and then have an augmented reality sculpture walk in the environmentally sensitive area to draw attention to you know, that issue, per se. So basically looking at very socially engaged kind of practice. So ways of using media art as the trigger to ignite young people's interest for a start, and then, you know, covertly, you know, teaching them a bunch of other stuff. So, yeah.
Deborah, do you have one?
So Scanlines is a database, and the exhibition for Scanlines is an online exhibition?
No, it's not.
Okay.
It will be an actual exhibition that tours around.
Ah, fantastic.
Yeah, yeah. One of the things Deluxe has also done is trying to bridge the thing between the virtual and the real and the embodied state. And, you know, I mean, I've got a sculpture background, so I'm also very much about things in space and how bodies move around things in space. And it still applies very much in this. Actually, I haven't really grappled with the online exhibition, really. Yeah.
It's a whole other world ready to be,
waiting
to be explored. But I think just finally, before we quickly move on to Sarah's presentation, I just note that there's the John Caldor Art on the Move projects that he did, I think maybe 6 years ago, if not more, probably 8 years ago now. A series of box DVDs of about 10 or 12 artists that he distributed with financial assistance of the Department of Education here in New South Wales.
We're actually working with the woman that worked on that, and I think what I want to do is take that a step further, because the feedback I'm getting from teachers in schools is that it just sits on their shelf.
Yeah, yeah.
So, you know, I want to be able to empower teachers to actually activate that material and give them a suite of resources that they can keep working with. So.
And also, very quickly, the Scanlines website itself, as it currently exists, separate from the discrete exhibition that you've produced, is there any way, if you haven't already done so, that you could begin to promote that as an online resource as part of the curricula for primary schools and secondary schools?
You see how stupid I am at talking, because that's what we're doing.
Okay, excellent. In that case, we'll move on to Sarah. So, Professor Sarah Kenderdine researches at the forefront of interactive immersive experiences for museums and galleries. In widely exhibited installation work, she has amalgamated cultural heritage with new media art practice, especially in the realms of interactive cinema, augmented reality and embodied narrative. Sarah concurrently holds the position of Professor at the National Institute for Experimental Arts, NIA, at the University of New South Wales, Art and Design, which will be launched tomorrow night officially as Art and Design instead of COFA. And also special projects for Museum Victoria in Melbourne. Sarah is also an adjunct professor and director of research at the Applied Laboratory for Interactive Visualisation and Embodiment, acronym ALIVE, at the City University of Hong Kong, and our thoughts go out to the pro-democracy demonstrators there. Sarah has recently established the Lab for Innovation in Galleries, Libraries, Archives and Museums, also known as IGLAM, at the University of New South Wales. Please welcome Sarah Kenderdine.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Alessio. Thank you to SAMAG. Thank you to Nita. What I'm going to talk about is really large-scale new media art and large-scale experiences inside museums in relation to cultural heritage. And I've chosen to go down that particular line of all the work that we're creating because it's the place that I find the most evidence for the real shift in the ways of thinking about digital experiences, and that digital is no longer a tool. It is a powerful, erratic object, and it sits with real objects easily, and beside real objects and amongst real objects. This will fundamentally change the way that museums think about and go about their business when they embrace that idea. The work that we're building is supported by the iCinema Research Centre in Sydney, the Applied Laboratory for Interactive Visualisation and Embodiment at the Hong Kong Science Park, which is a 1,400 square metre lab where we've got 9 large-scale immersive systems. At the ZKM Centre for Art and Media in Karlsruhe, and at Museum Victoria in Melbourne. So at all of these locations, we have installations, permanent or semi-permanent installations. We have 9 large-scale systems, so they enable human-to-human as well as human-to-machine interaction. And they're all world touring, so they are on the circuit, put it that way. Just to give you an idea of what these kind of works look like, this is a very modest project about a very great site. It's the Dongguan Caves in the Gobi Desert in northernmost China. It's 492 caves and 45,000 square meters of mural paintings, over 2,000 statues. It's in size and breadth like nothing else in the Chinese Buddhist world. It's under massive threat from rising tourism, and humidity makes the paint flake off the walls, and so there's a massive digitization effort underway. At Dongguan, there are 600 people working in the Dongguan Academy and over 90 full-time photographers, and they laser scan and then camera array photograph these caves. It takes about 3 months. They stitch it in situ. So we took the data set from cave 220 and put it into our AV system. It's a very simple, starts with a very simple data browser of significant caves above a laser scan of the escarpment at Dongguan. We go into cave 220. We simulate what it's like to be there now. So if you do go to Dongguan, you're with about 60 people and the guide has a torch, and in fact you see very little. But because this is a virtual cave, of course it can be navigated. This is 1-to-1 scale. We created a very high-resolution magnifying glass, which allows you to examine these dense mural paintings in great detail. This is the Sutra of the Medicine Buddhas on the north wall of the cave that we're looking at. Using the pigment studies at Dongguan, you can trigger layers that show how those paintings would have originally been looked. There are 32 musicians, and we modeled all the instruments in 3D. So the whole cave is alive with interactive elements. We also filmed Beijing Academy dancers dancing the Dongguan dance and put the video back in to represent the 4 dancers that are in the painting. So it's a whole range of visualization strategies. It was built as a prototype to look at how you could roll a visualization like this across 492 caves. And we have lots of ideas about what we're going to do there. But it became exceptionally popular. This has been seen by over 300,000 people. And it was also in America at the Smithsonian Institute. And I just take this quote because it's been talked about a lot, but this is quite a good one to represent the point that I made at the beginning. At last, we have a virtual reality system that's worthy of inclusion in a museum devoted to the real stuff of art. And this is about the changing nature of the digital in an incredibly conservative organization like the Free Osaka Galleries that can finally take a digital object that they think is powerful enough to sit next to their great objects. This is the same data set. It's printed on the walls of an exhibition booth, again at 1:1 scale. So it's, the wireframe from the laser scan. And you're walking around inside the model at 1:1 scale, looking at the very high-resolution textures that are on the model. So it's like a window on the world. What's important about this work is partly that it's extremely social. So we're often seeing in museums this desire for everyone to have their own app and their own device. But these are, of course, the reasons why you don't do that, because socialization is at the core of a museum experience, and we should be building experiences that enhance that. These are multi-generational interfaces, young kids, middle-aged ladies, grandmother, grandchild. Grandmother abandons the grandchild, takes on. So this was at the Shanghai Biennale, where it was for 6 months. And in the first weeks, it was getting 9,000 people a day. There are only 2 iPads. It was completely self-policing in that sense, and a great place for virtual tourism. Place Humpy was a work commissioned in 2006 and it's toured all over the world since then. It's based on a World Heritage Site in South India, the Kingdom of Vijayanagara. And it's based around stereographic panoramas, so very high resolution camera. Writing to film, there are only 4 of these cameras in the world. So it's staged in the Place platform, originally developed by Geoffrey Shaw, which we renovated, and you're rotating field about 120 degrees in 360 degrees. It's passive stereo, and you take yourself on a serendipitous journey of discovery through all the many wonderful locations at Humpy. With all of these works that I've shown, there are about 25 to 30 people also in the room in a single user multi-spectator model. You can speak into a microphone. You release Sanskrit into the world that comes from chapter 13 and 37 of the Ramayana, which is to do with the gathering of the monkeys at Kishkinda, because Humpy is said to be Kishkinda. It's got animations in it done by Indian artists and animators. It was the first stereographic animation ever done in India. So this is, of course, Lord Ganesha sitting at Hamakuta Hill. It has music by Dr. L. Subramaniam, and it uses ambisonic sound recording and motion capture and everything else like that. So what's interesting about this work is it's now part of an entire new museum next to the site of Humpy. So I built the entire museum that's on this end. The site includes dance pavilions and artist residency studios. The photo is taken from a new Hyatt hotel, and there's an airport just there, but really we're in nowhere. A long way away. It's 12 hours by car from Bangalore. It's an exhibition about the archaeological imaginary of that site, including many more traditional forms of visual entertainment. That museum has been incredibly successful, and now we're building a much larger museum in Bangalore, the Place Karnataka Museum, which will deal with 20 sites throughout Karnataka state, and also lots of intangible heritage. So performances and festivals will be included using lots of high-resolution panoramic imagery and immersive machines. Another of the projects that we're doing addresses this question that the majority of museum collections are not on display. So at the British Museum, it's 0.4%. At Museum Victoria in Melbourne, it's 0.8%. We've just finishing this data browser. This is not a recent video, but it has a fabulous soundscape now, and it's for Museum Victoria. It's 100,000 objects. So I think the largest other situated data browser is only 3,000 objects, so this is a much bigger system. It's simply an export from the content management system. It uses the metadata within the system to link all the objects together across 18 themes, so you can traverse this data set. It's like being in a massive elevator of images and you fly between the different levels. You can zoom in. It creates a Wordle from the content management description. You can access the description as well. Our most ambitious project at the moment is a world touring show, 9 large-scale platforms with 2 pieces of content. It's all focused on Asia, and this will premiere at Museum Victoria in 2016, and then we'll tour the world, and it will fundamentally change the nature of museum exhibition going, especially in that sort of global world touring show kind of model. These are classic pieces of content, and they're classic sites and of significance to major museums, but the formats are quite radical for these institutions, so this will be quite extraordinary. We're also interested in how visitors experience these things, and this is a new evaluation app that we're just finishing off that's trying to get at the embodied experience. So for years, we've been giving people blank pictures of their paper, and they can draw on their body, and we amalgamate those and do things like that. Now we've transferred that to an app. All the data is going in real time over the internet. It's aggregated and visualized in real time. So the kinds of questions that we're asking, this one's about social space. So you're the red ego in the middle, and you move all the dots around for your personal space. So in China, they bring all the dots together, and in France, they put them all at the edge. When you hit next, the data is uploaded to the system. These are drag and drop to do with how many people you were with and if you spoke to anyone new, the sort of social aspects. This is to do with levels of comfort. So that is very comfortable. It's a pinch type motion. So that's less comfortable, and that's very uncomfortable. So all of these, I guess, expressions of your experience are uploaded and aggregated. And we're just adding 2 new features. You can leave an audio file, which we will then mine to create the lexicon of museum experience, which I'm sure people will pay us for soon. You will do data multimedia analytics on the images that we visitors take. So that's, it's also possible to use a kind of system like this to express the embodied experience inside the space itself. So you can have that real-time data feedback and aggregation inside the space of experience. What differentiates this from traditional evaluation is that, number one, it collects a huge amount of data in a very short space of time. It takes 5 minutes, you deploy 10 iPads, you've got a lot of stuff. And it is also inside that space of experience, not afterwards. And the cognitive difference is well observed, and your memory of what went on and how you felt is quite different from when you are there. So that's the rationale. And we're busy with all sorts of things. I spent a year working with Jean Nouvel for the National Museum of Qatar. This is a 20-meter dome with a mirror on the floor so that you're suspended between the two image spaces. The exhibit is to do with migration and navigation across the desert of Qatar. So it starts with the Arab night sky, then it goes out to the desert, then out to the sea and under the water. And hopefully we will have a 4K experimental full dome at UNSW next year. So this will be a platform for inviting everybody and anybody to create interesting things and to come and do workshops and do dome fests, etc. Thank you very much. Yeah.
Thanks, Sarah. Nothing if not ambitious. And if you happen to have any spare change, you might wish to donate it to Deluxe Media Arts. Extraordinary, it really does demonstrate, I think, the series of projects that Sarah is and has been for many years been involved in, does demonstrate the sorts of things that one can strive for, and that the scale and also, of course, the budget required, the resources required, and the planning to, deliver these kinds of new, what are essentially multimedia experiences for both the museum space itself as a new space within a space, but also, very importantly, as a means by which to engage audiences of all ages in a media-savvy world. We're running a little bit close to time, and I would like you all to have the opportunity to sort of have a nibble on some refreshments and a drink, etc. Maybe we could squeeze in one or two very quick questions to Sarah.
Yes.
So Sophie here said I shouldn't ask another question, but I'm going to. Thank you. Wow, what a presentation. So many things I'd love to discuss with you. So let's have a drink. I've got lots of questions here. So I had to pick out a winner, and the winner I picked was around storytelling. Sure. And I wonder, with the incredible spectacles, the incredible interactive that you've shown tonight, what do you see as the role still of good old-fashioned storytelling in a great digital experience?
Sure. So, very on my mind. I'm currently writing a very large project proposal which is based around large-scale heterogeneous data and how you create stories out of it. Because the big problem in information visualization and scientific visualization for museums is it doesn't have a story. It looks great. So creating those kind of, in our systems, those emergent narrative threads that, in this case, the story is the Atlas of Maritime Buddhism. It's about the spread of Buddhism from South India through to China, down to Korea and Japan. And it's a very fragmented data set. How do we create coherent narrative out of that? And I think it's a really pertinent topic for our times because we're living in this mass data sort of frenzy. So how do we do it? A lot of our works are about navigation and exploring, and that is the narrative, and encounter. Whereas when you're dealing with data visualization, I guess it's like that Bruno Latour notion of where you have the image in relation to all of the other images, and that the creation of that context is how you drive that narrative. And in an emergent algorithmic interactive world, that's quite challenging. I'm sure that didn't answer your question, but anyway.
A final question?
Hi. Can I just ask the ballpark figure for development budget on that dome?
Oh, on the dome? So it's about $2 million, $2 million US dollars. without the floor. Yeah. Cheap. So you can build a nice 4K full dome for about 600,000. Gets cheaper all the time, right? Because projectors get cheaper every day, and you know, if you're into resolution, you're still paying a lot of money. Yeah.
Okay. If there's no more questions, we just might wrap it up again. Just being mindful that we've all been here for almost a couple of hours, and people have been enormously attentive. And thank you very much for your interest. I did plan to end on a quote, on an extract that I found online as a way of, had we had the time, as a way of trying to engender a kind of a loose, freewheeling, you know, perhaps dangerous discussion. In any case, I think that Giselle has covered some of the things that I want to you know, use this quote for. But maybe we can end with this. It's actually a blurb that was written to promote a forum at Duke University in 2010. And the forum speaker, the guest speaker, was Barbara London, whom some of you might know was, you know, a significant curator at the Museum of Modern Art in New York. She established the video and moving image collection there in the early 70s. So Barbara's been an associate curator there for some time. I think she's now moved on from MoMA. But in any case, she was speaking on this occasion in April 2010 at Duke University, and the marketing blurb included this quote, which I couldn't resist, so I'll read out to you, and then perhaps we can discuss it over some wine and cheese. Quote, that the latest generation of media artists is poised to reinvent the avant-garde. Today, artists use the latest gear and as readily as they sip water. Hackers, programmers and tinkerer revisionists draw on local culture and international sources. Women are at the forefront of this new frontier, forging new ways of working in a setting that combines social causes, technology and social networks. Breakthroughs appear out of the blue, changing everything in the uncontrollable, loosely defined field of media art, which crosses boundaries of every kind. So on that note, I'll thank you all very much for your attention and your attendance tonight. It's been wonderful to be sharing some of our knowledge and ideas with you. Thanks again to SAMAG and the Australia Council, and particular thanks for the generosity to our speakers tonight, Tara Morelos, Dr. Daniel Moody-Cunningham, Giselle Stanborough and Dr. Sarah Kenderdine. Thank you very much for coming.
I might just chip in a last thanks to Alessio for his very expert chairing of this panel. Thank you, Alessio.